Well, my name is Richard Close. I'd like to welcome everyone to the monthly meeting of the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. We have a lot of interesting things we want to go over today. Why don't we start by asking members of the board of directors to introduce themselves. And a couple of people, Maria and Bob, will make short presentations a little later in the meeting. So why don't we start off by Bob Anderson, and what you're going to be talking about in a minute or two.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Anderson. I'm a board member, and tonight I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on with Metro and the Sepulveda Pass projects. Things have started heating up and happening again. So,
Okay.
Let you know.
Matt, what are you going to do? Hopefully create problems for everyone, right?
Hopefully not. I'm Matt Epstein. I'm co-vice president of the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. Tonight I'm going to be the fielder of the questions. So a lot of people already sent their questions in via email, which I have those. And those folks that are on the call, if you have questions, go ahead and send the questions in on your Q&A. And if we have time to get to those, we'll get to those as well.
Okay, next, Jules.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jules Fear. I'm co-vice president of the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association, and I hope you enjoy the meeting tonight.
Okay, do we have a restaurant of the month yet?
No, we're just hoping the restaurants start opening, and then we'll worry about who the restaurant of the month is.
Okay, next, Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom Glick, board member, and I hope everybody enjoys the meeting tonight.
Maria.
I'm Maria Pavlou-Calban, and I chair the legislative committee, and I'll talk to you about SB 9 and 10 today.
Okay. And I guess John Eisen, is he able to join us?
He wasn't able to join tonight, Richard.
Okay. Marshall.
Hi, I'm Marshall Long, board member and land use chair.
And Nancy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy Segoyan, board member and membership chair. Welcome, everybody.
Aren't you going to make a pitch?
Oh, okay. I thought we were all going to save that till afterwards. Sorry. Okay. Hi, members. Thank you for your support. We appreciate you. We need you. Guests, welcome. Everyone here in this meeting is obviously concerned about our quality of life here in Sherman Oaks. And in order to preserve and protect it, the Homeowners Association works very, very hard to do so. And we work on housing, we work on mass transit, we work on beautification, we work supporting Sherman Oaks businesses. So our work here is really possible through the support of our members. And hopefully that's you. And if you're not a member yet, please join us. We need your support. It's a small investment that yields big dividends and big returns in a quality of life. You can email me with questions at joinsoha@gmail.com, or you can join and become a member right on our website, which is soha914.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, I want to introduce our senior lead officers. They are special officers with special work in our community. So I'd like to first introduce our senior lead officer, Jose Saldana. And maybe you can give an example of the type of work that is done by the senior leads in Sherman Oaks that is perhaps different than just the 911 calls or the calls for non-emergency service. Jose?
Thank you, Richard. Good evening, everybody. I'm Officer Saldana. I cover the southern portion of Sherman Oaks, pretty much from the 101 freeway down to Mulholland, Coldwater Canyon, and Sepulveda. Well, senior lead officers, our main duty is to public safety issues, concerns. Aggressive handlers are homeless activity that our normal patrol officers are not able to handle at the moment. We have the opportunity to work with other parts of the city in liaison with other parts, with LASA and other department entities, and work with them and to try to resolve an ongoing issue. Senior lead officers are also community organizers. We set up neighborhood watch meetings with each community. So we're a little different from patrol because we do have the opportunity to work and do long-term issues of ongoing problems that we have in our community.
Thank you. And if you could introduce your
Officer Magana covers the pink portion of Sherman Oaks, which is the northern part of Sherman Oaks. And I'll introduce Officer Magana.
Hello, everybody. My name is Officer Magana, and I'm excited to be here at the meeting for my first time. If you notice, yes, I do work the pink area up above Jose. And we also, which wasn't included in theirs, also do business dispute mediation. So if there's issues that are going on within a community, instead of taking patrol out of the field and working that issue, it'll come over to us, and that way we can help try to alleviate that situation with a minimal issues proceeding from there. So again, pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Next up is Maria Calban, and she's been doing some fantastic organization in Southern California. Maria, what's needed and what's being done?
Thank you, Richard. SB 9 and 10, which I have talked to you about a number of times, is a really destructive and harmful bill that will end our single-family neighborhoods. By September, if that gets voted in, 10-unit apartment buildings or 8 single units on each lot of housing is going to be a by right in every single community. It doesn't matter if you're a gated community, if you're a hillside community, it is going to be state law. So we're trying to stop it. And it's very important that we all understand that we are not anti-development. We want a positive message that we're trying to find housing in our communities. But it does not have to come into single family neighborhoods in order for us to achieve that. I have started a coalition that last year was 8 community HOAs. And tonight I have 76 community organizations that have joined us. They are all over LA area. They include some San Diego, and we're already getting calls from the Sacramento area. So we are uniting. We're going to have a strong voice. We want people to hear single family neighborhoods have a right to exist, just like multifamily units and high-rise apartments. We think everybody has a right, and affordable housing is important, and it needs to be funded by the state. And we're going to make our pitch to every single person that will listen. And the only thing we ask of all of you is we're doing the groundwork. We're going to unite all these groups. And then when we need you to write or call, we need you all to do it, because it takes a whole lot of people to get everybody's attention. And our organization is now called United Neighbors, which is what we are. And we certainly support renters and homeowners. This is just a terrible bill, and we need to stop it. So that's my report tonight.
Thank you very much. Next up, Bob Anderson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Anderson, and tonight I want to talk to you about the Metro project through the Sepulveda Pass. It turns out that Metro is now active again. They have finished the competition that they have been doing, looking for new concepts from industry. And Metro has announced that they have selected 2 concepts from industry that they're going to start pursuing along with their own concepts. One of those very happily, is a monorail down the 405 freeway from Van Nuys all the way to the west side. That's a concept that we have supported as an organization. So has the neighborhood council. And the concept was accepted and got the highest score of all the concepts that were bid to Metro. The second concept is from, LA Skyrail Express, by the way. That's the name of the company that builds it. You knew them as BYD in the beginning, but they formed a consortium called LA Skyrail Express. The other winning concept is different, and it's from Bechtel Corporation. And it is a heavy rail, the big trains like the Red Line that goes downtown from North Hollywood. Unfortunately, their concept is a subway on the west side and under the hill, but they decided to put it above Sepulveda Boulevard in Sherman Oaks. I'm not sure why. We're trying to learn more about it. There's Metro meetings starting tomorrow, which I'm going to attend, but we're not happy with any concept that goes above Sepulveda Boulevard in Sherman Oaks. And I'll be asking a question to the council member who's our speaker tonight, because he's a Metro board member. So we'll see what he has to say.
And Bob, why are we not happy?
Because it's big, elevated, heavy rail tracks above Sepulveda Boulevard, and the columns will take up a lot of space where traffic used to be able to go, like left turn lanes. It's going to be noisy for anybody who lives on or near Sepulveda on either side of the street. And it's going to be a mess for Sherman Oaks, building it above one of the major streets that's more crowded than any other street in the valley, probably, for several years. So it's something that we've told Metro we don't like, and we'll continue telling them.
Thank you very much. Next up is someone new to Sherman Oaks. Well, not new to Sherman Oaks, but new to participating with us. Alex Nassif has joined with our new councilwoman, and Alex will be our field manager. So she's the person you need to know if you need to have problems solved by the city. She will be your, I don't want to take her presentation away, but she'll be your person of contact. So if you could introduce yourself and give us a little background, and how do we reach you? When should we reach you? You have the floor.
Thank you, Richard. Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you all for having me here in this meeting and welcoming me in this new position. I'm not new in Sherman Oaks.
Right. I corrected myself.
I've lived in Sherman Oaks for 6 years and now Los Angeles for 13 years. But most of that 13 years I've lived in the Valley. So I also lived in Encino for a little while. But I also recently served on the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council. I was a board member. I was also on the Education Committee and Outreach Committee. Currently, I am the new Sherman Oaks Field Manager for Councilmember Rahman. As the primary point of contact for Sherman Oaks residents and business owners and our council office, I am here to listen to your concerns and ideas and actively communicate resources as well. Like I said, I lived here for 6 years. I live here with my husband and my 2 daughters. I previously was a full-time support teacher at Van Nuys Middle School, which despite the name, it is in Sherman Oaks. But as far as updates from our office goes, the CD4 website is continuing to be updated. Our new district director, Andrea Conant, started this week, and soon we will be bringing on our new legislative and planning director. So we're so excited to have more administration and staff. I still, unfortunately, do not have my city email, unfortunately. So for now, constituents can reach me at contactcd4@lacity.org. Again, that is contactcd4@lacity.org, or at our district line phone number 213-473-7004. And I'll repeat that one more time, 213-473-7004. And last but not least, I wanted to inform you all that we will be rolling out our volunteer program very soon. We will be engaging our volunteers in assisting with community wellness checks, as well as finding ways to assist our neighbors. So I know we will be starting to work with SONC for their Neighbors Helping Neighbors program, which is exciting. And thank you. I know you had mentioned it about the elections, but the SONC elections are soon, and the deadline to register as a candidate is next week. And the SONC Speaker Series, this will be our third series. It is set for next Saturday, February 27th at 2 p.m. on Zoom. You can find all this information on the SONC website. And we will have 3 speakers at this event. We have 3 project directors and professors from the UCLA Labor Center who will be discussing disparities in employment and hiring practices in Los Angeles. So all exciting things. Please let me know.
Thank you very much. Thank
Has
you.
questions.
I
Thank you.
look forward to seeing you at upcoming meetings. And we encourage you to speak at every meeting each month. So with that, I'd like to introduce our main speaker, Councilman Paul Krekorian, who represents the area right to our east.
Richard, I think you forgot Andy Solomon.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I did it on purpose. Andy, where are you?
I'm hiding right here, Richard, hiding in plain sight.
Oh, okay. Oh, boy, sorry about that. Okay, so Andy is our Deputy City Attorney for Sherman Oaks. And he is going to explain, what does a Deputy City Attorney do that is of value and help to residents of Sherman Oaks?
Thank you.
Andy.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Andy Solomon. I'm your neighborhood prosecutor. That's my title for Van Nuys and Sherman Oaks. So I'm from the city attorney's office, and I'm put here not to be a regular deputy city attorney, but I'm more of a, over the years, I've figured I'm more of like a public safety consultant. So I open projects. I am very concerned with public safety. I have the ability to prosecute crimes, file criminal cases in court, which I do very often, and I go to court for them. But my goal ultimately is to solve problems using every resource available to us. I work with the police a lot. I work with senior lead officers. I work with CD4, CD2, CD6. I work with you, the community, and I work with everyone that will work with me, really, frankly. And I solve bigger picture issues that normal traditional prosecution would not solve. One example would be, you guys know about the pink vans that are parking around the city, the topless maids vans or the pink vans or whatever. That's a project that I'm working on. And that's actually not just our area, that's basically the whole city. Excuse me, but that would be a project we work on. For example, that situation, traditional means would not really work because that car moves every 72 hours, but sometimes they break the law and we have to figure out how we can make it a comprehensive solution rather than just a one-off thing that doesn't really solve the problem and we go in circles and circles and circles. So the best way to reach me is my email, Andy, A-N-D-Y, .Solomon, S-O-L-I-M-A-N, I think I have it spelled here somewhere, at lacity.org. That's the best way to reach me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Sorry about missing you there. Bob, anyone else I missed?
Take it.
Okay.
No, Richard, that's it.
Okay, so I want to now turn it over to our councilman to the east, who has, we've worked with him since he was first elected councilman for the San Fernando Valley. Very important person because he represents, his district is all San Fernando Valley. So he is aware of all of the issues that are arising in the valley. And as was previously pointed out, he serves on the Metro, which is an important project for the city and the valley in particular. So with that, I'd like to turn over to our adjacent city council person, Paul Krekorian.
Well, thank you very much, Richard, and thank you to everyone on the board of SOHA for the folks who are coming in. I'll add to Nancy's pitch a little bit because SOHA is known throughout the city really as being one of the most effective community-based organizations in the city and in getting things done in City Hall. And it's because your board is so diligent about informing itself at great depth about the issues, and because the board and the members are so diligent about staying engaged and really actively involved in not only with your own council member, but with the entire city council, with the mayor, with our commissioners, with neighborhood councils and otherwise. So this is an exceptionally effective organization, and that really this is really where democracy happens, with organizations like this that stay as involved as you are. And so I want to thank you all for your engagement, and to everyone who's tuning in tonight for your interest in hearing about a little bit about your city. I'm here. It feels good to be sort of coming home again after quite a while. I used to represent Sherman Oaks some number of years ago before the last redistricting. And so it's good to be with you again. I'm here really primarily in my role as the chair of the budget committee, because this has been, needless to say, a year like none other in the history of Los Angeles. And we have felt the impact of COVID, both in terms of its public health impacts, of course, but also in terms of its fiscal impacts on the city. And so every one of us is feeling the impact of the loss of revenues that we've felt. And I want to try to put it into a context, if I may, because I'm now entering my 10th year as budget chair. And when I started in that role, we were still in the aftermath of the Great Recession. And it was a horrendous time to be taking on the job of helping to run the city's budget. We were facing significant deficits at that time. Mayor Reardon, former Mayor Reardon, had written an editorial for the Wall Street Journal saying that it was inevitable that the city is going to declare bankruptcy, so they just ought to do it and get it over with and move on from there. That's how bad it was because of the revenue collapse that the city had experienced in the aftermath of that recession. And we didn't, thankfully, follow that advice. We moved forward, we reduced costs, we engaged in negotiation with our labor unions and achieved some pension reforms and other savings. We reduced the size of the workforce to the smallest it had been since Tom Bradley was mayor. And through a number of other steps, we were able to continue forward. And as the economy of Los Angeles began to recover, so did our revenues. And we were able to really rebuild a budget that was fiscally responsible and healthy, in fact, the healthiest it had been in recent memory. We went from that point of nearing bankruptcy within a few years to a point where we not only had a balanced budget, we'd eliminated almost the entirety of the structural deficit, and we had built up the strongest fiscal reserves that this city has ever had in its entire history during my time as budget chair. And so we were stable, we were secure, we were on sound and prudent fiscal footing. And then came COVID. And all of a sudden we had gone from a point where the economy truly was really humming. We were breaking all records for business starts, for business gross receipts, for occupancy in rental property, occupancy in hotels, traffic through LAX, our port traffic, breaking all records. And when COVID came, all of that almost immediately ground to a halt. And the city of Los Angeles has a revenue stream, has revenue streams that are highly economically sensitive. We rely heavily on sales tax, on gross receipts tax, on transit, the hotel tax, a number of other sources of revenue like that, that when the economy slows, those revenues drop precipitously. And that's what happened here. So in a short amount of time, we were looking at this fiscal year we were looking at a 10% year-over-year revenue decline, nearly 10%, which was about 4 or 5 times worse than our worst year during the Great Recession in terms of year-over-year impacts. So this was a situation where the house was on fire and we were scrambling to try to save whatever we could as the house was burning. And over the course of this fiscal year, unfortunately, it has not gotten better, it has gotten worse. When we had the surges, our expectations about the recovery of the economy were delayed, were set back badly. And so when maybe 6 months ago, we were told that our revenues would probably be another $50 million short of what the mayor had budgeted. In a best case scenario, maybe 200 million short in a worst case scenario, that became 400 million short. And then it became $600 million short. And it seemed like there was no bottom to the shortfall of our revenues. Businesses haven't reopened. Hotels are still empty. People are not making the level of purchases, especially in longer term expenditures that they were. So revenues are still really in a terrible situation. So we have responded to that. We're now facing a situation where we have had to figure out solutions for about a $675 million deficit in this current budget year. And we have addressed that for the short term with a number of short-term solutions, including cuts of over $100 million in the budget beyond what the mayor had already cut in this fairly bare bones budget. We tapped into those robust reserves that I talked about, the reserves that my committee had spent 8 years building up to those very strong points that they were at. We have tapped into the reserves down to the emergency reserve level. So over $150 million coming out of the reserve fund. We had created a budget stabilization fund, basically a rainy day fund, because we knew someday the economy would soften and we would need to, we wouldn't want to be making cuts in our budget. So we created a budget stabilization fund to kind of squirrel some money away and save it for that rainy day. Well, we've tapped into all of it, over $100 million out of the budget stabilization fund, zeroed it out for this year. Beyond all that, we've had to engage in some borrowing to the extent of maybe $100 and $150 million to get through this year. That's something we never have done in my time and never would consider doing in anything other than an emergency situation like we're now in. And then we've gone back to our labor unions and we've negotiated deferrals of raises that they were expecting under their collective bargaining agreements, and taken a number of other steps to realize concessions from our labor unions, all of our labor unions, which are going to realize not so much this year, but next year, well over $100 million in additional savings. And then we've used some of the CARES Act money, the COVID relief funds that we've received to offset some of the expenditures that we've had, because while these revenues have suffered, we've also had significantly increased expenses in response to COVID for testing, for overtime, for now the vaccination program, for PPEs, for all of these things that we've had to immediately respond to the crisis with, much of which, arguably is cost that should have been borne by the county or by others, but we didn't have time to sort that out. We needed to save people's lives. And so those expenditures were made. Much of that will probably be reimbursed eventually by FEMA, but it may take years before we get those reimbursements back. So that's the sort of really stark look at where we've been. Now I want to speak a little bit more optimistically than I've been able to in some time, because it does appear that Congress is well on its way now to approving legislation that for the first time would provide relief to local governments for revenue loss. Because all of that CARES Act money that you heard about in the previous stimulus package, not a penny of that could be used for revenue relief by local governments. It was very helpful to, inject that money into our local economy to help support our local businesses. It was very helpful in many, many ways, but none of it could be used by local governments to replace lost revenue. But the new bill specifically does provide for that. So we're very hopeful that this will pass the Congress and be signed by President Biden, so that we will have, a significant amount of relief, like local governments across the country, which will help us to be able to rebuild services and replace some of those cuts that we've had to endure. It's vital. It's absolutely vital. And I would just urge you all to make sure that you're in contact with your congressional representatives and our senators to make sure that that support for local government is included in the final version, because that's what will prevent cuts to public safety and cuts to the other sorts of draconian things that we're having to engage in. It's really vital the federal government comes to the aid of local government. Now, I just want to say also, the way forward for the longer term is not going to be based on these short-term remedies, and it's not going to be based on federal support. It's going to be based on restoring our economy to the position that we were in just a year ago when things were going so well. And I have chaired for a number of years, and 4 years, our ad hoc committee on jobs creation. And through that work, we've created a comprehensive jobs creation plan for the city of Los Angeles. And we are implementing many of the provisions of that. The COVID crisis created, somewhat greater urgency in getting a lot of that done and adding even new things to support our business community. One of the areas that I've been focusing a lot of time on is on procurement reform for the city of Los Angeles, so that more of the money that we spend as a city, your tax money, gets spent to support local businesses. It gets spent to purchase things from local businesses, because it doesn't make sense to, buy pencils from a company in South Dakota when we can buy it from a company in Sherman Oaks. So those are the sorts of things that we've really pressed to make sure that local businesses and especially small businesses are able to flourish and participate more effectively in procurement for the city of Los Angeles. We created the first small business commission in the history of the city, which gives small businesses an actual voice in the policymaking process where they have traditionally been too often left out because big businesses have plenty of opportunities to come before the council and to hire lobbyists and to do all the public relations things that they need to do to have their voices heard. But small businesses are busy trying to keep the doors open, are busy trying to make payroll, and they don't have time to schlep down to City Hall or to meet with their council members to have their voices be heard. So the Small Business Commission provides a vehicle by which our policy decisions are hearing from the small business community. During the COVID crisis, once it began, I worked with the mayor to create an $11 million small business microloan program. And that money has gone out to help support over 700 businesses to help them keep going and keep afloat during these difficult times. And then very important to Sherman Oaks is the city's alfresco program. This was a program that I was working on in the NoHo Arts District even before COVID. And when the crisis hit and our restaurant community was hit so badly, maybe worse than any other sector of the business community, outdoor dining seemed to be a way that they could kind of stay afloat and keep people employed. And so we pressed forward with a very aggressive alfresco program to try to make sure that we would have as much opportunity as we could for restaurants to continue to stay open while still providing a safe environment for both customers and staff of those restaurants. And it was so popular and so successful that all of the funds for the alfresco program were quickly used up. I pressed for $2 million of additional support to keep it going and expand it beyond the initial applicants. And so it's been a great success, and especially now that we're getting to a point where the COVID numbers are coming down again. Hopefully this will be an opportunity if we all as a society continue to take this seriously, continue to take the necessary steps, wear our masks, remain socially distanced, don't have the super spreader parties and all that, then hopefully with this continued diligence, our business community is going to continue to go through this reopening process. And I believe we'll be well situated as the vaccines are more widespread to really have a strong recovery. But it is going to take a little while. It's probably not going to be a matter of months before our economy is humming again. We're going to have a difficult budget year again next year. But I am confident that with the vaccination program coming, with the many special events that are coming up in Los Angeles, the Super Bowl, World Cup, eventually in 2028, the Olympics, with the ongoing investments in our infrastructure through Metro and Measure M and so many of the other areas where we're investing billions of dollars of public money into infrastructure in Los Angeles. These are all great opportunities for a very, very strong economic recovery. And with that strong economic recovery will come a much stronger budget and an ability to deliver services that our constituents deserve and demand and should be getting. So that's a quick overview. And Bob, I know you want me to talk about Metro as well. I'm happy to do that. I do serve on the Metro board and the board of Metro Link as well. So I'm happy to talk about that or any other issues that you all would like to ask about.
Okay, with that, we'll turn it over to Matt to ask some questions.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Is it okay that I call you Paul, or should I call you Councilmember Krekorian?
You can call me whatever you'd like, Mr. Epstein.
Thank you. The kind of very depressing information that you brought on, very necessary for us to know. Thank you for that. Our first two questions that are going to be fielded tonight have to do with the homelessness issue. We had a lot of questions having to do with the homeless problem. So the first person is going to ask is Gail. And Gail, you should be unmuted at this point. If you could narrow down your question, though, because you've got a long question, if you could just narrow it down to give Paul an opportunity, or council member to give an opportunity to answer.
Okay, I'll be happy to. I'm just looking for it. I wasn't prepared, sorry.
That's okay. Let me come back to you. let me come back to you, Gail.
Okay.
And Tess Taylor, excuse me, Tess Taylor has a couple questions and a statement. But again, Tess, if you could address your concerns about, or your question about homelessness with the council member, and then we'll come back to Gail's issue.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this opportunity to ask questions. I'll start with one, and I'm sure other people have others. If there's time to come back, I have several. The tiny homes and the pallet housing initiatives. Interesting concept. It's barreled forward, but I think a lot of people oppose the privatization and appropriation of public assets, such as public parks, which includes me and many of the people who I represent in a neighboring community. And we really want our voices to be heard before these housing initiative policies are determined and then imposed upon us. So my question is, because I've analyzed some of the budget numbers that were provided, and it seems that a lot of the costs that are rather high actually are costs to the city that the city could reduce. So how are contractors and vendors solicited, qualified, evaluated, and authorized? And how are these projects managed to ensure that they are delivered on time and on budget? We hope that the process is audited, and more than anything, what happens when the temporary status expires? We want these to be successful, but we want to know what success looks like and how these processes are even determined in the first place. Sorry for the long question. Thank you.
No, it's a terrific question. There's a lot to unpack in it. So let me start with a little, I guess, background for those who are not as engaged as you obviously are in this. So it has been my goal in my district. I'm just speaking about my own work on behalf of the 2nd Council District now. It's been my goal to ensure that we, as quickly as we can, provide adequate bridge housing capacity to be able to accommodate every single person living on the sidewalks of my district right now. That has been an urgent goal of mine. And it's urgent to me because we're obviously facing a humanitarian catastrophe, a public health and safety catastrophe, just a catastrophe of economy, of so many social consequences of homelessness that affects all of us, the housed and the unhoused alike. And we just have to take immediate action to remedy this. Now we have an ongoing litigation, as I'm sure many of you know, that's being overseen by Judge David Carter, a judge from Orange County who oversaw the litigation that occurred there. And he's working to try to bring all of the advocates for the homeless population, the advocates for the business community, and others who want change, the county, the city, and many others onto the same page about who's responsible for what in order to get action accomplished. The city doesn't have a role when it comes to things like, mental health services or drug addiction services and things. Those are public health issues that are the county's responsibility. But we do have a role when it comes to housing, sanitation, public safety. Those are the principal areas around homelessness the city is uniquely responsible for. So I'm taking care of that housing part by creating as much bridge housing as I can, as fast as I can. And that includes 2 bridge home facilities, one which was built in a commercial building, one which was built in a tent structure. It's called a sprung structure. And then one tiny home village that's already open and 2 more still to come. So let me get to that. You mentioned the use of public property. I have been trying literally for over 10 years to find a use for the piece of property that the tiny home village on Chandler is currently built on. It's a piece of park property, technically, yes, but it hasn't been used for anything other than illegal dumping and encampment and graffiti in that entire time, because it's entirely cut off from the rest of the park by Chandler and by the Orange Line. So the tiny home village seemed like a perfect fit for that spot. Now, you mentioned the budget for it. This was a project that the city oversaw. The city built this village. We are working with Hope of the Valley as the operator. We've contracted with them, but we built that. We did have outside contractors working on the project, and by some accounts, a project that cost more than people assumed it should have, but there was a good reason for that. Much of that cost was in site preparation. That was a piece of property that had no sewer line. It had no electricity. It had no plumbing. It had no sidewalk or safe pedestrian access. So we had to invest in a lot of those things, but those are all things that are for the public's good. Yes, they will service this tiny home community, but after that is gone, whatever other use is made of that property for recreational purposes or otherwise will be benefited by that infrastructure investment. So it's really not appropriate to count all those investments, I think, against the cost of housing the homeless individuals that are able to be there. The tiny home village is a great concept because it provides a different option of bridge housing for people who might otherwise be unwilling to go into a congregate shelter. Someone who is for example, a couple or a parent with an adult child. We had a situation in my district where there was an elderly woman taking care of her developmentally disabled adult child, male, and we couldn't find a shelter that they could go to because the congregate shelters are gender segregated. So the tiny homes provide a real solution for situations like that. And the more that we can reduce barriers to entry to shelter, the quicker we're going to be able to bring people in off the streets and be able to restore a degree of order to our communities.
All right, thank you, Paul. And if hopefully we can maybe shorten the answers a little bit.
It's tough for me to do that, Matt, as you know.
Just an idea so we can get this.
I'll try to get more sound bitey, but it's really not me.
I understand. Okay, and Gail's going to be getting unmuted in a second, but I want to share something with you, Paul. I participate in a monthly top producers call with other agents in 54 different communities in Southern California, and it's been really interesting since COVID. How people are looking at their lives, and about 15 to 20% of the home sales today are happening because people, for 2 reasons. Number one, because it's so expensive in California, and that's been a constant, the taxes and everything else. That's not something you can address, but it's very interesting because Los Angeles is the only community of the 54 that I'm on that call that homelessness is it ranks almost as close why people are moving out of Los Angeles. They don't want to deal with the taxes, but they also don't want to deal with the homelessness anymore. These other communities through Southern California, Los Angeles is the dumping ground. And this is just a statement, not necessarily something that you want to answer, but it is the dumping ground right now for the homeless. And other communities have their fair share of it, or I'm sorry, they have homeless problems, but nothing to the scale of Los Angeles. So, again, it's just food for thought as you're trying to promote business, as you're trying to get businesses open. This has to be something that's taken care of. So, Gail, if you're there.
I'm here.
Okay. You want to ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Councilman. Thank you
Hi.
for being here. My question is related to sanitation in regard to the homeless issue. And I'm wondering if you would please address the problem of piles of garbage along valley streets, and in some cases in the streets, specifically near camps of unhoused persons. While we've become reluctantly used to Angelenos having to live on the streets, we shouldn't have to accept loose garbage left on our street for days and sometimes weeks at a time, especially during a pandemic. Sending the sanitation department once a week to empty a single trash can is not sufficient. I've been astonished by the high mounds of trash on sidewalks on Lancashire under the Ventura Freeway and have had to dodge items in the traffic lanes while driving. Similar situations exist on Moore Park under the Hollywood Freeway, on Laurel Canyon and Coldwater Canyon under the Ventura Freeway, and along Valley Heart by the LA River. This situation is only becoming worse, and I'd like to know what your plan is to deal with this. Thank you.
Well, I couldn't agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more about identifying the problem. The solution, unfortunately, as with many things around homelessness in Los Angeles, is complicated. So there was a point a year or 2 years ago, I guess, where as we saw this really dramatically increasing number and density of encampments throughout the city and the resulting situation like you've described, that I think with some reluctance, because people didn't want to accept this as a status quo that was going to be acceptable for the long haul. And we should never accept this as being something that is the new normal. But for now, we have to realize that the reality is we have a large and growing population of people who are unhoused. And the federal court decisions are very clear that we can't simply act to criminalize that state of being. We can't take the sorts of steps that some people think should be done to just move them along, as other cities do, as Matt was just suggesting, I think, and he's correct. Some of our surrounding cities don't worry too much about the niceties of constitutional law. And they go ahead and they just do enforcement that is obviously unconstitutional and illegal under the Ninth Circuit decisions. And the result is a lot of people end up, in larger encampments in Los Angeles. So realizing that we have those encampments, we have two choices. We can allow that problem that you've described to get worse, or we can try to address it. So trash cans went out to all of the large encampment areas that sanitation would then pick up. Porta potties went out, hand washing stations, went out to all of these major areas, all of the areas where we've had a history of encampments. And it's a inadequate response, but it addresses some of the impacts that we have of concentrated encampments, both for the people who are living there and the surrounding community. That being said, even after putting out trash cans and other things, we're still having the exact problem that you've described. And that comes from inadequate staffing of sanitation to go out and do the regular emptying that we had been assured they would be doing. I am dissatisfied in their responses because I'm the budget chair. We didn't cut their budget to do that service. And yet we're not seeing the service levels that we need to see. So my first solution that you asked about is to hold sanitation to account, because they need to do a better job, number one. Number two, I supported the CARES and continue to support the idea of our CARES Plus team, which were sanitation teams that would go out and do cleaning in and around encampment areas, and not do it as an invading force, but to do it in a way that would be hopefully supportive as well of the needs of the homeless population that's living in those areas, by giving them a degree of sanitation, connecting them with services, and providing them with a shower, a mobile shower, and things like that. So the idea was to create an environment where we would be more successful in cleaning some of those areas that you're talking about, cleaning the trash, cleaning the other, meeting the other cleaning needs of the encampments. Unfortunately, this is another casualty of COVID, because the COVID, the clear public health instructions from the CDC and otherwise is that during a time of COVID, it is the correct course of action not to move people out of encampments, because the risk of public spread of COVID increases as we do that. So during this time, sanitation has really been kind of handicapped in their ability to do even that rudimentary cleaning. And so they're just kind of cleaning around the edges. And to me, it's not very effective at all, because whatever they clean, the same consequence ends up coming right back.
Okay, thank you. Maria Calvin is one of our board members. She has a couple questions for you. And Maria, because I'm asking the council member to shorten his answers, which he's not doing, if you could shorten your question a little bit, just so that he has time to answer your first question. I'm gonna, Maria, I'm gonna keep your mic open for two questions, because you have two different questions.
Okay, council member, my question is that we're very supportive of Councilmember Carez's resolution to oppose SB 9 and 10. But we're concerned that the resolution states that the city, with the concurrence of the mayor, opposes SB 9 and 10. And since last year, the mayor did not sign the resolution opposing SB 1120, and the city was not recorded in Sacramento as opposing the bill. So since the city charter states that the city council may establish the official position of the city and can override a mayoral veto by a 2/3 vote, does the wording of the Councilmember Carez's resolution actually prevent the council from acting on its own should the mayor again refuse to take a position or veto the resolution?
That is an excellent question that I do not know the answer to, because that's boilerplate language that we include in every one of our legislative resolutions. But it's something that I want to find out, because I will tell you, as a former member of the state legislature, when the city of Los Angeles took a position on legislation, it was never fully clear to me whether that was the mayor's position or it was the position of the mayor and the council. And I see no reason, I shouldn't speak out of school until I find out the answer, but I see no reason that the council as a whole couldn't take a position with or without the mayor's approval. It may be limited in the way it's reported to the legislature as being the position of the city council. But I did not know that until what you just said, that the mayor had not concurred in the previous resolution. I'm a seconder on Mr. Kretz's resolution, so I will go back and find that out.
Thank you. That's great. Let's see.
Your second question, or you want me to come back to you, Maria?
Actually, one of them was regarding the tiny houses, and I think they're just terrific ideas. And I just wondered if the city is actually considering doing it citywide, trying to add more of the tiny house model.
So I'm doing 3 of them in my district. We have the first one built. There's another one. There's 2 more that'll be built within the next few months that'll be finished. And when that's done, I will have met my goal of having adequate bridge housing for every single person on a sidewalk in my district. I think that it's gotten such tremendous positive response that I know that Bob Blumenfield is working on a community in his district, which I think may be open by now. And I think other council members have a real interest in doing that too. And, you know, I was the first, so this is a little bit of an experiment, but if it goes well, I think we'll find, and this goes to the previous question too, we'll find ways to further reduce cost, create economies of scale, and so forth. So it's one solution of many solutions that we need. It's just, you know, we need a whole spectrum of different responses to the homelessness crisis. This is one.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay, great. Bob Anderson is going to be asking the next question.
Hi, council member. How are you?
Hi, Bob. Doing terrific. How are you?
I'm good. Last Friday, we were very excited. Metro announced their selection of the 2 industry proposed concepts, the monorail on the 405 and the heavy rail, which I first thought was a subway, but then learned that half of it is going to be running above Sepulveda Boulevard in the valley. And we're really disappointed about that because SOHA has been pretty vocal, so's the neighborhood council, that we really don't think we're getting our fair share if they put it underground on the west side and above Sepulveda Boulevard, not to just mention the damage it's going to cause to Sepulveda Boulevard. If you lived in an apartment, you'd be looking out and, you know, into the train as it goes by every 4 minutes, which is not going to be quiet. So we're wondering, as the Valley's only Metro board member, will you give us a commitment to work with our community and get the Valley its fair share? And would you please meet with us so we can present our concerns maybe in more detail to you instead of at a forum like this?
100%. I am the only pure Valley representative, I guess, on the Metro board. I was the previous chair of the San Fernando Valley Council of Governments when we created our list of highest priorities for Measure M, and the Sepulveda Pass improvements were near the top of that priority list for the whole San Fernando Valley. You're right, Bob, that this was the proposals were just released. These are not Metro's proposals, of course. These are proposals submitted by these consortiums to be considered, and Metro selected 2 to engage in pre-development agreements with. That hasn't even been considered by the board yet. But it is an exciting prospect that we can work with these developers, shape their projects as environmental review proceeds. And I very much understand that Sherman Oaks in particular, and much of the rest of the valley, has specific interests in one mode of transportation over another, and one maybe different routing decisions location of stations and all of those other factors. And you have my absolute commitment that whether I represent you in the council or not, I feel I do represent you on the Metro board. And so I look forward to working very closely with you. And I urge you to all be very fully engaged in this, because Bob, I know you know, and many of you who've been to Metro meetings know, a lot of other communities are really engaged. And sometimes, you know, they get maybe more than would otherwise be justified just by being the relentless squeaky wheels. And I want to make sure that the Valley is that relentless squeaky wheel as well, and that we always get our fair share. Under Measure R, let's face it, we did not. There are something out of 90 plus rail stations in the Metro system. 2 of them are in the Valley. And so Measure M really provided us an opportunity to remedy that. And I'm delighted that we're investing so much into the transportation infrastructure of the Valley, but we have to do it in a way that serves the Valley's needs and the needs of Valley communities as well.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is going to be asked by Jay Weitzler, another board member. But before I ask, we open up his mic, I'm going to ask a question from the audience that was typed in earlier, and it was responded to by one of the senior lead officers. But I want to put the question out there as well, because this was something that you were a focus. You were bullied on this subject a while ago. The question is, what is the status of the legislation to prevent the pink back page vans, or formerly the topless maid vans, from using disabled place cards to endlessly park in one place? They are a blight on our city.
So thank you. And I'm so glad that Andy was here to discuss that very thing at the beginning. And I hope that one of the things that we're going to be that the neighborhood prosecutor and the city attorney's office is going to be focusing on is that abuse of the disabled placards, because those vans and the mobile billboards that are the cousins of those vans and owned by the same people often have been such a blight, such an atrocious blight on our community, a threat to public safety, abusive to local businesses by taking up parking spaces to advertise other businesses right in front of them. They've just been a horror. And I worked on this even when I was in the state legislature. Before I got to the council, Bob Blumenfield also worked on that in the legislature. And now that we're both in the council, this has been a real priority of ours to get rid of these things. And you're right. I had one of them respond by putting my face on one of those huge mobile billboards at the corner of Laurel Canyon and Moore Park for a long time. So they're bad enough under any circumstances. And to abuse the rights that we give to our disabled community to spread this kind of, cheesy advertising is, to me, disgusting.
So is there any legislation that's being worked on to make either statewide or countywide?
Well, it's already illegal. I mean, it's illegal for them to use these improperly as it is. So if there are things that we can do either locally or by lobbying the legislature to make that more effective, I mean, I don't know if Andy is still on the line, but I would love to work with the city attorney's office to develop whatever tools need to be done. I have asked the Department of Transportation in the past to do sting operations for just people who park in disabled spots, who abuse that, who are not disabled. So, I think we could definitely target folks like this who just consider it the cost of doing business. They get a ticket, they don't care. They move the van 3 feet and they keep on doing their ad because they're making so much money that they don't care about writing the tickets, paying the tickets.
All right, Jay White, so you have 2 questions, but please just ask one of the questions, whichever you feel. And if we have time, if Richard doesn't pull the hook on me, then I will get you back.
Okay. Councilman, it's a pleasure to hear from you tonight. And I want to follow up on Maria's question for a moment, her comments about the city council resolutions. And for those of you in the audience for the people in the audience who aren't that familiar with Senate Bill 9, I just want to point out that when we talk about the fact that it will take away and eliminate single family residential zoning, that means that my house, which has one house next door, will probably have a minimum of 4 houses on the same piece of property to my left and 4 houses at a minimum on the same piece of property to my right, whatever direction I'm supposed to be pointing in here. So people have to, the people who have thought about that and who are aware of that are outraged. And we wondered why it seems that the city council seems so passive and has not lobbied the state legislature in a much stronger fashion to maintain the local zoning and the continuation of your job to control local zoning so that the person from Sacramento doesn't make a decision for us. Where has our city council been? Los Angeles is the big dog in the state. We don't hear that the council is speaking out for us. So ultimately, I'll ask you, why should we continue to vote for city council people who don't appear to represent their constituents who are very strongly against Senate Bill 9? Where are you people?
Well, I think your assumption is just wrong. Councilmember Koretz, myself, many other members of the council have been very vocal about this continuing assault on local control of land use. Other members of the council have different views about it. Some feel that the housing crisis in California is such that they're either neutral or even supportive of the state legislation. My view is very clear, and I've been in the state legislature. I was a member of the state assembly, so I know whereof I speak. The folks in Sacramento think they know more about how to plan land use in the city of Los Angeles than I do, and they're wrong. I know my neighborhoods. I know my community's needs. I know the extraordinary efforts that the city of Los Angeles has already made to try to meet our housing shortage. And I see other cities around us who are not pulling their weight, and we are. So we're already doing our share. I don't need the state legislature to tell me how to run a city. Let them run the state, let the city council run the city. And so I think your presumption is just wrong. We've been very vocal about that. I have personally been in Sacramento lobbying the state legislature on this exact issue. I have spoken to both of our state representatives personally multiple times on this issue. Thankfully, they're both very supportive of our position on this as well. So
thank you. I appreciate that. It just make it more a public, make your position more of a public issue. Let the public know exactly what you're doing, because what your answer is perfect. We love to hear that, but we don't know it because we don't see it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And maybe this is a stylistic mistake that I make, but I try not to spend a lot of my time talking to my constituents about things that I try to inform them. But, if we pass a resolution in support of an issue in Sacramento, the people you need to be talking to are the people in Sacramento. It's not, I think too often activism is centered around City Hall, even on issues that are going on someplace else. Or should be going on someplace else. So I appreciate your point. I will try to keep people informed about what's going on in Sacramento to the extent that we can, but your ire should be directed to the state capitol, not to City Hall.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The next question we're going to open up the mic for is Marshall Long. Marshall. Marshall, you there?
Looks like you're muted, Marshall.
Okay.
Okay.
You're
we have
muted,
time for
Marshall.
one-
No, he's unmuting now.
Okay.
we have time for one more question.
Okay, thank you for being with us. I'll take you back a few years. When Harvard Westlake proposed a parking lot across on land they own across the Coldwater, and they proposed a bridge that would take the students across safely from one side to the other. You got voted down. I think your office opposed it, but then later Oakwood, who I think, which is also in your district, another school, built a bridge over the street right in front of them, and that was approved. And so I just don't know why there was a difference.
Sure. I think the biggest difference was that the Harvard Westlake, the bridge was not the biggest problem with the Harvard Westlake project. First of all, it would have been a huge bridge. Second, it would have, been over one of the few arteries that connects this part of the valley with the rest of the city. But the bigger part of that project, the bigger problem with that project was the construction itself. In Oakwood's case, they weren't engaging in any big construction project. They weren't taking away any open space. They weren't building anything that would change the use. They were connecting one part of their campus with the other part of their campus, existing parts of their campus, with a bridge. So then it just becomes a building and safety issue. You just look and make sure that their bridge complies with all of the requirements that building and safety would impose. We have bridges all over the city. We have overpasses of freeways and all sorts of other bridges that go over streets. That's not a problem in itself as long as it's properly built.
I know Richard said one more question, but I'm going to actually ask a follow-up question to that one, which doesn't really count, and then we'll have somebody open up from the mic. Tess Taylor has a question for you. So I'm just following up with the question that Marshall just asked you. Can you give a short briefing on what's happening with the Harvard Westlake River project plan as far as the Sioux City golf course? Any new information?
They haven't advanced the project for approval. There hasn't been any change in so long that I'm afraid I don't have a current update on what the status is and what they're doing with their proposal right now. As you know, I submitted a long, detailed letter of the changes that I expected that they would have to make in their proposal to gain my support. I think there's been some willingness to I hope, to meet all of those requirements or most of them. But where we stand right now, I'm sorry, I don't have an update for you.
No worries. Thank you. Tess Taylor, are you there? Are you unmuted?
I am now. Thank you very much. Thanks for a second shot at the apple here. Councilmember, thank you very much for supporting Councilmember Koretz's resolutions. That's very, very, very important. And I agree with Mr. Weitzler. If you could be even more vocal about that and influence your fellow council members, we would be very grateful. I appreciate the comprehensiveness of your response to my question about homelessness, but the thing that was missing in your answer.
No. Hold on. I'm sorry, Tess. I wanted you to ask the last question.
Oh, the last question. Okay, I submitted another one in the chat. Is there any truth to the rumor that you are going to go for the city controller job, council member?
I had to end it with an easy answer for you.
It's not something I'm really considering. I'm in my last term on the city council. I've got a lot to get finished. And so that's not something that honestly, it's not something that I've considered.
So what about the Board of Supervisors?
Well, that is something I've considered. I haven't ruled it out. I don't. I'm not trying to be cute here. I honestly, I haven't made any decisions about any other positions like that that I might seek. I'm feeling, you know, our late friend Tom LaBonge, who we were very, very sad to lose, used to tell me all the time that you know, that time in this job passes really quickly. And I remember his last couple of years on the council, how, because he was my seatmate, how urgent everything seemed. He was so urgent to get things done. He had such a long to-do list of things. And I'm starting to feel that in my last term. I'm feeling there's so much that I have to get done that I can't really spend a lot of time thinking about other offices. I need, and I really, I know this sounds trite. It isn't meant to be. It's just that this office presents a lot of demands, and especially at a time of crisis like this that we're facing on so many levels. COVID crisis, economic crisis, homelessness crisis, all of these issues that we're having to juggle. I can't spend 5 minutes thinking about other things that I might want to run for. I got to focus on trying to accomplish the things that I need to do in this job.
Okay, with that, I want to let everyone know that's on the meeting here that the questions that were submitted will be given to the councilman. So even if your question was not asked, he will receive it.
Thank you.
So that's important.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll wrap up tonight's meeting. Our next meeting will be the third Wednesday in March, and it'll feature City Controller Ron Galbraith. With that, we look forward to seeing everyone next meeting, and thank you very much for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be with you,
Paul,
everyone.
it's a pleasure.
Good to
Paul.
see you.
Mayor Fear, it's always good to see you, sir.
You look great.
Thanks for joining
Thank you all
us.
very much. Have a good
Yeah.
evening.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Thanks for your good work.
My pleasure.